to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast, coming to you from DraftKings Studios with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
October 15th, week 6, and I just want to say, I am jacked up for this slate this week in bets. There's a lot of good things going on, so dude, let's get this party started.
I love it. Yeah, you're bringing the energy here in week 6. We're hitting mid-season form. Obviously, we're 5 weeks into the season, now almost about to be 6, which is crazy. I would love for this NFL season to slow down because the weeks just fly by. But yes, this slate we talked about before we started recording. We think it's an interesting slate to attack, especially for tournaments with the slate getting smaller. The obvious good plays are, there's less of them. So it's easy to attack in GPPs if you find a couple leverage spots. Hopefully we can do that today on the show and continue the success that our listeners have had over the last 2 weeks.
Yes, I think there's some points this week where if you find the right combination of running backs, because our favorite 2 running backs, Dalvin Cook, CMC, we're not really sure their status or if they're like full confidence plays. We don't have Derrick Henry. If you figure out the right combination of running backs, and then you're able to stack your quarterback with 1 or 2 pass catchers and bring it back, I think you're in a really good spot this week where one of you as listeners, and then I guess Betz and I can take down a GPP. So this is an awesome slate. I'm glad you're with us. This is DFS for the rest of us. If you've been listening to us, we're glad you're part of the process of learning the game, how to play it long-term, talking about cash lineup constructions. We'll talk about games we want to stack. We'll go back to our Battle Royale. And then this week, we wanted to open up the mailbag even further. So we have a number of questions I got some of them from our Discord people on Join the Foot our DFS channel. And then Betz put out a special tweet and some of you guys had some really good questions. So I'm excited to get into this this week. But I wanted to start off with a quick question. I might have gotten 7 or 8 of these bets, and it's about late swap. And we've talked about this before, but I just wanted to bring this back up. Why do we care about late swap in terms of, any slate, but specifically on a slate that's even smaller? Why do we care so much, and what advantage is there when you think about late swap? And that's, for me, usually, hopefully it's a player in my flex that I figured out if it's an extra wide receiver, an extra running back. But after that first kind of morning games, why is it so important to incorporate late swap? I might have gotten 8 of these questions.
Yeah, I get them all the time as well. And we've talked about it on a couple of shows to this point. But the basic take home is that you just have way more information at your disposal once the 1 o'clock games kick off. You know who most of the field is playing because oftentimes the way the NFL sets up these slates, there's way more games on the 1 o'clock than there are the 4 o'clock. And this week, I think there's only 3 games in the 4 o'clock window. Yeah, just 3. So it's very front loaded in terms of what is going to happen at 1 o'clock. So you're going to have a lot of information at your disposal. How did the popular guys do? Did your contrarian pieces hit or not? And you're just going to kind of know where you're at in the process. And then using late swap to your advantage, basically looking at, okay, is there any plays in that 4 o'clock window that in tournaments especially that we think are, maybe guys that are being overlooked. Maybe you had an awesome start that you don't have to go that far off the board to get to them. Maybe you had a terrible start, so now you do have to go to those overlooked guys in the late swap window and play those quote-unquote bad plays or not optimal plays and really use those roster percentages to your advantage. So I would just say the take-home is that you just know way more about what the slate is looking like once 1 o'clock kicks off and the games unfold than we did hours before. And not a lot of people use late swap, right? When they set their lineups, they kind of just set it and forget it type of thing. But late swap can be a really big advantage in tournaments especially. And there was a couple weeks in cash early in the year where I was like, man, this is not looking good. Like we need to swap here and get off of the chalk plays to hopefully hit. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But oftentimes that process is correct given the right situation.
When you build out your lineups, something you can do is, I'm a person that loves just writing on a sheet of paper, get a spreadsheet, whatever you need, and look at those afternoon games. So this week it's Arizona and Cleveland, which we'll talk about that game. It's going south. Like that game, I would take the under right now. There's just some bad vibes. Raiders and Broncos, Cowboys and Patriots. Like those are the 3 games this week in the afternoon. And ask yourself, like, what are some plays and how does it fit with my salary? So, if you have, let's say, Kyler Murray or, some other popular plays might be Darren Waller or Josh Jacobs. Like think about those players and how much their salary is and how much is in your actual lineup. Think about how you can pivot. I actually think the 1 o'clock games are going to be way more heavily rostered. Like there's some just games, awesome games we'll preview that I think is going to be the main stacking, including that Kansas City Washington game. Like That game, in my opinion, is going to make the slate. Would you agree?
As far as it being the most popular, and if it hits and you don't play it, you're kind of screwed. And
Right.
if you do play it, then you can come away from the 1 o'clock slate in a really good spot. So yeah, I'm with you. That's a huge decision point here in week 6.
So if you want more interaction from us, we have a Discord channel that's for members that are part of jointhefoot.com. And so that's really easy. That's an easier place. Sometimes with tweets, it kind of gets passed over. So gotten to interact with some awesome people on there. And it's a better chance for us to take your questions and post lineups and have some other people just kind of critique like, hey, this is too many, you have too many giants. Why are you stacking giants in cash? So don't do that unless you don't want to be safe at all.
Sad times for the Giants.
I know, not good at all. But if you want all of our picks, once again, those are in the DFS Pass. Betz and I just released our FanDuel and DraftKings cash and GPP picks. Those are a doozy. Like, we put in a lot of time over a couple of days to give you a core group of players. And that's just something we want to continue to preach. It's not just one lineup. It is a core group of players. And over the weekend, you can kind of mix and match and, tweak your lineup to find out who the best players are. But you can get that at dfspass.com. Use the promo code DFSPod if you want to save some. But let's talk about our cash game plays.
Straight cash, homie.
Had some listeners this past week that have been sharing how much they love the straight cash homie drop, and they've been saying it to other people. Do you say it often to Monica?
Oh, of course. She asks, hey, you want to stop and get Chipotle for dinner? Straight cash, homie. Of course I do. Hey, you want to go out to dinner tonight, or you want to go do something fun? Straight cash, homie. Yes, let's do it. So I've used it interchangeably with the word yes. I'm not sure she's caught on yet, but it is fun to say. I'll say that. She's
a huge Randy Moss fan, though, right?
Oh my gosh, she just loves it. Like pulling up the YouTube highlights every night. She probably doesn't know who Randy Moss is, which is just a travesty.
It's funny to think how much Betz and I interact during the week, and just in terms of our process, in terms of content, and how many players. And then when we turn and talk to our wives about it, they're like, no idea who any of these players are. And it's fine for me, but it's hilarious. Like, how many players, how many numbers, how many things go in our mind. And that conversation, my wife's like, I know who, Julio Jones is, Calvin Ridley. She's like, she knows the Falcons, the 2 and 3 Falcons, resting up on a bye. So she knows those players. But straight cash, homie, let's talk about our cash picks. And for me, quarterback has shrunk. Like, there's maybe 2 or 3 guys I want to play in cash this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. And really, I think in tournaments, like in the GPP article, I kind of put in there, like, here's how to get different. But my strong lean is like, I'm going to have a pretty small pool this week, and it's these 3 names. These guys stand out as far and away the best plays on the slate at quarterback. Let's start the conversation with Justin Herbert. I mean, what the heck is going on? He is just setting the league on fire with King of Analytics, the fantasy football community just embracing Brandon Staley. We all love this guy. And how can you not, right? I mean, first in neutral situation pace, they're top 5 in neutral situation pass rate. And we just saw what he did to the Cleveland Browns, who people think like, yeah, they're a pretty good defense. Well, the Ravens, people think, oh, they're a pretty good defense. Carson Wentz on Monday Night Football looked like a friggin' MVP candidate against this team. So I have zero concerns about any matchup at this point for the Chargers. Herbert just feels so safe, 3+ touchdown passes in 3 straight weeks. He kind of feels like he's going to hover between 250 and 300 yards every single game. Just a lot to like about this game. Love Herbert and cash this week.
Herbert feels as safe as they come, and his salary is just not that high. Like, I've been going back and forth if it's Mahomes or Herbert, and when I can save $1,000 on DraftKings and get Herbert, I love that. Baltimore's defense, will preview that game, but they've been getting picked apart through the pass. But yeah, Mahomes at 8.3 feels like he's due for an explosion. We don't know Tyreek's status. Like, he didn't practice on Thursday as of this recording. So I feel like for me, I would only play Mahomes in a GPP if Tyreek wasn't there. And then Lamar's the other one. He's got that Monday night pricing glitch at 7.4. That's too cheap for his skill set and what he can do. On FanDuel, he's the best points per dollar play on the slate. Like, Lamar Jackson is 8.2 on FanDuel. He's cheap. I would play him. I have him in my cash game lineup right now. So those 3 are guys, and we'll highlight a couple of GPP stacking options. Taylor Heineke and Mac Jones are probably the only other 2 ones that I would even consider in cash. Is that your call too?
Yeah, I'm almost even hesitant to say that because I'm really not considering any other quarterback in cash this week. I mean, those are the three guys, and I think if Tyreek Hill is out, for me, the quarterback pool shrinks even further in cash, and at that point, it seems like a pretty clear decision, in my opinion, to play either Lamar or Herbert, and really, we have nothing negative to say about either guy, and we also know the correlation between when one quarterback goes off, the other one does, so both these guys in a good spot, like you really can't go wrong with Lamar or Herbert, in my opinion, in cash games.
The biggest conversation this week is at running back. There are probably 4 or 5 running backs in the 6K range on DraftKings that I love. Like I totally okay playing all of these guys. They've all been in my cash lineup at one point. So in the 6K range, you have Darrell Henderson, who is 6K on the dot against the Giants, 10.5 point favorites. I love his spot right there. He's been solid. I don't know if his ceiling is as high as these other guys, but he feels like a 15 to 18 points. Like I can bank on that in terms of his workload. He's the dude. JTT, Jonathan Taylor is 6.6, and DeAndre Swift feels game script proved at 6.2. And if TJ Hawkinson is out, like he hasn't, like Swift's locked in my lineup. So who else do you like in that range?
Yeah, I think that's a great call too with Swift in terms of the passing volume. 18.7% target share this season. The Bengals allowing the highest percentage of targets to the running back position in the league. So it just sets up perfectly for Swift. And if Hawkinson's out, he's the dude for me in this range. I'll also throw out Joe Mixon. You know, he's a guy that split the work last week with your boy Samaje Perine on the COVID IR list right now. We don't know exactly if he's going to play, but if Samaje sits, Joe Mixon's workload will get ramped up rapidly. And he's clearly the lead back, but they limited him last week coming off the ankle. If we get word that he's 100%, a full practice participant on Friday, I mean, the Lions rush defense, dude, over the last 2 weeks, David Montgomery went off for 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards. Alexander Mattison last week was one of the best running backs on the slate, over 100 yards, a touchdown. Like, they're just getting destroyed on the ground. And so Mixon, to me, is tough. Right now, my lean, my favorite 2 in that range is Mixon and Darrell Henderson. But again, if Hawkinson is out, Swift quickly becomes probably my favorite of the bunch.
I'll throw out Ezekiel Elliott. He's, I think, too cheap for what he's been recently, 7.1. Cowboys are running the ball at the 3rd highest rate. We'll preview that game, but they've basically turned into a team that wants to run first, and we're not seeing the same passing volume. And so far, the Patriots are allowing the 4th highest rush rate. So if that goes in the Cowboys' favor, I think Zeke is another safe play. On FanDuel, I'll just throw out a couple of guys that just, their price is kind of weird. Antonio Gibson is 6.7. That's like way too cheap. It's only $200 more than he is on DK. So I love his spot if he's healthy in that game, the game total. And then, you know, Darrell Williams is somebody you could play on either site if you really wanted to punt at 4.9. On DK, he's 5.2 on FanDuel, which makes him an even better play. So love both those spots there. But what are you doing with CMC and Cook? Because I've almost like closed my eyes, put my head in the sand. Like, I just don't know what to do with these dudes.
I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to make bets talk about it. Yeah, it's tricky with CMC because early in the week and on the Tuesday show, we said, yep, looks like he's back. And then we had Matt Jarul on Thursday tell us that, well, you know, he's about 50-50 to play. So we don't really know right now. I think the team is going to make the smart decision with him and say if he's not healthy, we're not going to play him. So if he is active and if he is playing, I'm going to operate under the assumption that he is good to go. And at that point, he would become a really intriguing cash game play. But this slate is so tricky because we talked about it. Like, the quarterback pool is shrinking for us. Like, at the top, it's so strong that if you want to play that quarterback, you almost can't play McCaffrey or Devontae Adams or Travis Kelce or like one or two of those guys. So it becomes really tricky. My early lean in the week right now, as the information we have, is to go with 2 of the guys in the 6K range, pay up at quarterback. But obviously, if he's active at 8.8K, it's just so cheap for what we've seen Christian McCaffrey in the past. Like, hasn't been this cheap since 2020. Like, it's been forever since he's been this cheap, and we know his role is safe. So if he's active, he becomes one of the strongest plays on the slate.
I was writing it up in the FanDuel article. Just when Christian McCaffrey was like, you know, over 10K, 11K, it didn't matter. Like, he was paying off at his price in a ridiculous way. So yes, he's just too good. So 8.8 is like you're stealing. Wide receiver, we mentioned on Tuesday, Keenan Allen is our favorite wide receiver on the slate. He might be our favorite wide receiver just in general because we love him. And Mike Williams is kind of banged up right now. So we love his matchup in the slot. But what other wide receivers do you like?
Yeah, let's go with my boy Terry McLaurin, who very, very quietly is just racking up targets at the second highest rate in football behind only Devonta Adams since week 1. That's how strong his usage is, and you're getting a price discount relative to the other top tier wide receivers. Absolutely love him at 7.1K. We talked about it, on the Tuesday show, like who is this team's wide receiver 2? We have no idea. Logan Thomas on IR. Curtis Samuel probably not going to play. De'Ami Brown injured. Cam Sims injured. Terry McLaurin is going to get 10 plus targets, I would almost say confidently. And against the Chiefs, their secondary has just been atrocious this year. So I absolutely love him in cash. But if you want to go down a little cheaper, I'm looking at 2 names. Your boy Michael Pittman at 5.5K. He's got 6 plus catches in 4 straight games. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Lions, the rookie slot wide receiver. Again, if Hawkinson sits, someone has to catch the football in Detroit. And Mike Hilton is a guy that we've picked on often throughout the year in the DFS Pass, the slot corner for the Bengals.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to find some value this week at wide receiver if you want to get, if you want to pay up for Kelsey, if you want to pay up for a quarterback. So the key is finding those wide receivers in the 5 or 6K range, or even punting further. Amon-Ra St. Brown. I still think Adam Humphries is viable. I think that one of those Washington wide receivers is going to be fine. It's either going to be De'Ami Brown if he comes back. DeAndre Carter is a crazy punt play. I was actually talking to Jason about him today because he saw 8 targets this past week, and Jason likes him a lot. He's 3K though. I mean, if you're really wanting to save and you want that, but who knows based on the usage, but Humphries feels like the safe, super cheap, give me 7 to 10 points PPR. You're going to have to find that, but Jacoby Myers is probably the best middle value, like where I'm like, okay, Jacoby Myers, the matchup against the Cowboys, they're giving up the second most passing yards. That sounds like almost 15 points in PPR. Like he's going to do it. Maybe he'll get in the end zone. And then I'll throw out another name because Kadarius Toney is getting all of the publicity, and rightfully so. But Sterling Shepard, if he comes back and he is healthy, and today he told reporters, I'm playing, 5K is too cheap for his skill set, even in a tough matchup against the Rams. So I don't mind Sterling Shepard. And I actually have found, like in our early projections, like he's above 10%. So he's not sneaky, but I think people will be talking about him. But any other plays you like? I know on FanDuel, Devonta Adams, easily the best play on FanDuel.
Yeah, he's cheaper on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. Just play him over there. That's where I'm going to get my Devonta exposure this week, especially in cash. Brandon Cooks, he's cheap at 5.8K. Like, it's gross because it's the Texans and it's Davis Mills, but the Colts have been pretty bad against wide receivers, and he's seeing a great target share. I know last week was a down week, but he's a confident play for me based off volume. Also, just throw out, if Tyreek Hill does sit, Mecole Hardman would certainly enter the conversation at 4.2K. He's basically kind of operated as like Tyreek's direct backup. Saw a ton of targets last week. So in a game environment we like, if Tyreek Hill does sit, then I would say that makes the slate a lot easier because then you have multiple guys in that like low 5 to high 4 range or low 4 range rather that are pretty comfortable. So that's a huge point to monitor and huge injury to monitor as well on the slate.
Yeah, Mecole scares me. He had 12 targets last week, but I looked up this stat. He's finished inside the top 24 of the wide receiver position only 16% of the time in his career. Like, I just don't know what to get out of him. But yeah, if Tyreek's out of the way with that salary, I think he comes into play totally. But at tight end, that's kind of where you and I have been talking all week is you could do double tight end and cash this week, and we wouldn't call you crazy because right now you and I actually have that in our cash lineup. So which tight ends and how would you construct that? Or is it just like play Kelsey, play Andrews, or play a combination?
Yeah, it's really whatever you prefer to do as far as like pay up at other positions or come down a little bit at tight end. Really, it's like 3 guys for me in the conversation: Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and Ricky Seals-Jones. And I'm hovering over a lock button on Travis Kelce at 7K. I mean, the last time he was cheaper than 7K, it was November of 2020. I don't understand what happened with DraftKings. I'm not sure why they're giving us Kelce for free, but I'm going to take it and I'm going to play him. And so at that point, it's just a matter of, do you want to just punt it off at tight end with like Ricky Seals-Jones as, Kelce is your flex or something? Or do you want to punt it off for a second wide receiver position, which, as we talked about, it kind of feels like you're scraping the bottom of the barrel for cheap wide receivers this week. So my lean right now is to have RSJ in there with Travis Kelce. We just talked about like someone has to catch the football besides Terry McLaurin. Last week, he played 99% of the snaps, saw 8 targets, so he feels really safe at 3K. And then for Kelsey, you guys don't need us to tell you he's a smash play every week.
That's where I'm having an issue is it's either RSJ or one of those Washington wide receivers that's going to be a fine punt play, and they're in the great salary range. So you kind of have to ask yourself, like, am I flexing RSJ or am I doing that with Humphreys? Andrews is just, when I keep staring at him, because I think I have Kelsey in my lock spot too, 5.2 for a receiver is ridiculous, but he's not really a receiver. He's more than, he's just such an awesome blend. The Chargers have been giving up to tight ends. So right now I have Andrews and Kelsey in my lineup, and it feels super safe. I like it, but I know that's going to be soaking up a ton of the roster percentages. If Hill's out, this is my last question on tight end. Kelsey right now we have him at like 12%, which almost feels too low in terms of roster percentage. If Hill is out, if you knew that, do you think Kelsey jumps to like 25%?
Probably higher, honestly. Probably 30. Easily could get to that mark. I mean, it would just be so mispriced with that information. So that's why Tyreek is such a huge name to monitor this week.
All right, let's go with defense. And I have two teams that are standing out to me. It's not a great week for defense. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Again, only 10 game slate, right? And like there's 5 or 6 that you just cross off automatically that you don't want to play because they're so expensive. So it's really tough to get to the cheap punt guys that we like.
Yeah, so the Lions are at home against the Bengals. I'm not saying it's a great play, but it's a punt play at 2.1. But I actually think the Browns are shaping up to be a really good play at 2.6. Like with all the news we're getting around the Cardinals and COVID tests and Rodney Hudson's out, like I actually think the Browns are a great play. So I've had a couple of lineup constructions where I've said like, okay, I've never usually like rearranged my lineup to get to a defense, but if I'm playing Joe Mixon, I don't know if I want to correlate that with, a Lions defense. Like that's just not the best play. I mean, you can do it. So I've been trying to figure out ways I can get the Browns in there at 2.6, but any other names you like?
No, that makes a ton of sense. And I also threw into my articles on the site. I threw in the Cardinals. We're going to talk about them much later in the show. Spoiler alert. But, they have been a team that has been able to create turnovers. And if this game does kind of hit the under or kind of have this slower pace to it, like it could become more of a defensive battle. So I'll throw them into the mix as well for the same reasons you mentioned with the Browns. But those are really the big 3 for me on DK. And then all throughout on FanDuel, Minnesota sticks out there, 3.7K against Carolina. Sam Darnold sacked 8 times over the last 2 weeks. He's kind of come crashing back down to earth. And Minnesota ranks 3rd in adjusted sack rate on the defensive line. So they could be a nice salary-saving option if you're playing over on FanDuel this week.
Yeah, and you can pay up on FanDuel for the Colts if you want them at home against General Mills. I don't mind that at all. But let's talk about these games that we want to stack.
Stack Attack.
I just realized that in this Stack Attack portion of our show doc, I still have Mike Glennon's face in this, and technically he could play this week, but I think it's looking like Daniel Jones is going to play.
Fortunately, unfortunately. Yes, I would just love for a Mike Glennon week, but it's not going to happen, I don't think.
No, I don't think the world, my children aren't ready to see that. They're not.
No,
I want to protect.
God, no.
I want to protect. So yes, you can get all of our picks, especially GPP ones that we'll discuss here in the DFS Pass, but we're going to preview 4 games, talk about them from a stacking perspective, and maybe game script wise, like what could we see happen and how you want to attack it. So the first one is the biggest one on the slate. It's now up to 56.5 in the DraftKings Sportsbook line. It is the 2-3 Kansas City Chiefs versus the 2-3 Washington football team. Would you say that these are the 2 most disappointing teams in the NFL?
It's hard to say that they're not, that's for sure, especially given that, the Chiefs were like the preseason Super Bowl favorite by a lot of teams. A lot of sharp people loved the football team to go over their win total, and they've just been mediocre to bad. So yeah, both teams below 500. I think a must-win game early in the season for both teams. So it is really intriguing. And like you said, that high total with just how these offenses can operate, I think creates the most popular game stack for good reason on the slate. It's just a matter of, do you want to go all the way into the roster percentages that are going to be here, or try to fade it and pivot elsewhere, or maybe not come in with the same exposure as maybe you would like to, just given, again, it's going to be so popular. But yeah, they've both been just super disappointing.
The problem I'm finding with stacking this game is that both quarterbacks are popular. Like I actually, right now, Heineke is like the fourth most on our roster percentage report. So it's not like Heineke plus McLaurin is getting different than anyone else, or Mahomes, Kelsey, McLaurin. Like that seems like the most common construction you could do stacking this game, and it could totally get there. But the other pieces in this game, I think, is what you need to attach, because I think somebody is going to get there. Like it's Mecole Hardman. It's one of those ancillary guys for Washington. Like one of those pieces, I think if this game goes over, and I think you and I both like the over, like they're going to get there. So the question is like, how do you stack this game? So if you are going Mahomes, I'm assuming you're putting Kelsey in there. What else are you doing in terms of stacking?
Yeah, like you said, it does become really difficult because if you play Mahomes, you play Kelsey, let's say Tyreek Hill sits, you play Hardman, like you're just following the crowd and everyone's going to do that. So I wouldn't bring it back with Terry McLaurin in that scenario because, again, he's going to be popular. I would not bring it back with Ricky Seals-Jones. He's going to be popular. The name that I'm looking towards in tournaments is Antonio Gibson at 6.5K on DraftKings. Really, the argument here is that Kansas City is terrible in every facet of their defense, right? They can't stop the pass. They can't stop the run. They're giving up 5.2 yards per carry. That's 30th in the NFL. They're 31st in success rate to running backs allowed. It could be an Antonio Gibson week where everyone thinks it's going to be Taylor Heineke, Terry McLaurin. I guess my only hesitation, and this is really why it's a tournament play, not a cash game play for me, is if they get behind, do we see more JD McKissick? And then in that point, you're stuck holding the bag with Gibson. But if they can control it and keep it close, Gibson could be a phenomenal bring back or even just a one-off play if you want to fade this game in tournaments. So I don't hate that call at all.
On FanDuel, he is 6.7. I brought him up earlier, but he's just way mispriced there for his touchdown equity. He had 2 scores this past week. So I do like that call a lot. And on DraftKings, I think he's coming in lower because of the injury concerns. And it's kind of like throughout the week, I think he's going to continue to kind of grow. Like right now I have him at 6%, and that feels too low for his skill set and the price and the game. Like I feel like 10+% is kind of more his thing. But I think there's always the worry that people have is, this feels like a McKissick game. And the reality is McKissick has kind of been phased out the last couple of weeks. Other than that really one big game he had, he's been phased out. So I like that call a lot. If you wanted to get different and say, you know what, I think Darrell Williams is going to score 2 touchdowns and the Mahomes stack doesn't get there, then that's a way that you can say, I want Heineke, I want McLaurin and Williams, and just be done and say Kelsey gets, 20 points, but he's not a tournament differentiator. Like that's a conversation you're having with Kelsey at 7K. Is he going to get you 25 plus points? That's what you need. And are the other tight ends on the slate going to fail? So is Waller or Andrews going to fail? So that's kind of where I'm at. But any other thoughts about stacking this game and what you'd like to do?
Yeah, it's so tough because it's so clear where the football goes on both sides, right? Like it just looks so difficult to get different here that I almost think that if you're going to play this game outside of like maybe the Gibson contrarian play, like you just eat the chalk at a couple pieces and be willing to say, okay, I'm giving up here. I'm going to let the crowd and everyone else, go with me, and hopefully this hits. And if it does, fine. But just know that like you can't play Chargers and Ravens. You have to get different elsewhere in your lineup as well. So it's okay to play it in tournaments. Just know it's going to be popular, but it's hard to talk about it differently because every play that's going to be a strong play in projections is going to be very, very popular. So it is really difficult this week. I think you just eat the chalk if you're going to play it.
Yeah, like we mentioned Mahomes and Heineke, super popular. Darrell Williams is like top 5 just based on salary alone. Kelsey's going to be popular. RSJ's popular. McLaurin's popular. That's why I've been talking about those cheap receivers, because one of them, let's say they go 5 for 60 and a touchdown at 3.4K. Let's just say it's Adam Humphries, just for argument's sake.
Just randomly, let's just pick him.
Let's just pick that it's him. He has a PPR game, but those are the kind of things. And in that scenario, let's say that this game doesn't go over and you have somebody like that, then Humphries is probably the piece, or DeAndre Carter or De'Ami Brown, and you're fading the rest of the chalk. So this is a perfect game for the game theory portion. That's why I love this game. It's like, there's so many pieces I like, but everyone's talking about this game. So I'm not saying to fade it, but just realize everybody else is in on it too. So what's your Vegas call?
Yeah, I like the over. Both of these teams have hit the over in 4 of their 5 games, so I will take the over even at 56.5 points.
I will take the over, and if we get news that Tyreek is out, I would actually take Washington plus the points.
Ooh, I like it. There's going to be a ton of money on the Chiefs, don't you think?
Yeah, and if they just want to forward that to my account, they can do that.
That'd be fine.
It's fine with me. All right, let's talk about the game that I think you and I just love thinking about because we love the Chargers. We just think they're cool. Keenan Allen's our boy, and the Ravens are a super fun team. So Chargers at Ravens, both teams are 4-1. This game is a 52-point total, and Ravens are 2.5-point favorites currently, according to DraftKings Sportsbook. So this is one of those games in the early slate that I think is going to make or break lineups. And there's a lot of plays we like on here. We love both the quarterbacks. Love Austin Eckler. There's just a lot of pieces to like. So where do you want to start?
Let's start on the Ravens side. I think everyone thought I was going to say the Chargers. Let's start on the Ravens side. We talked about Lamar and Herbert. I don't think there's much to say about either guy. They're both very, very solid plays in any format. I am excited about the Ravens side because I think there's a spot here that we can attack in tournaments, and that is Marquise Hollywood-Brown, who right now, early in the week, looks like he's going to come in 10-ish%. That, of course, could change by Sunday, but everyone is playing Mark Andrews and everyone is playing Lamar, but it doesn't seem like people are buying into Marquise Brown at $5,900, an awesome price tag on DraftKings. And dating back, the last 11 games he's played, he's 50-plus yards or a touchdown in every single game. He's a wide receiver 6 in PPR leagues. He's priced as the wide receiver 15. Massive disrespect, my boy Hollywood, in a game where, the Chargers, they're designed to limit these deep plays, but Hollywood Brown is not just a deep ball receiver anymore. He's kind of winning across all parts of the field. And at that tag, stacking him with Lamar and bringing it back with one of the Chargers sounds really intriguing if he's going to continue to go overlooked on this slate.
I feel like Hollywood Brown and Mike Williams are two players that have this boom or bust label. They've been consistent this season. And almost it's oh, well, we saw them do it last week, so we know what's going to happen this week on the roller coaster. So both those players could win you a GPP. And if they're coming in, like you said, under 10%, it's even better. That's why I loved Williams last week, is because everyone was like, oh, we know what this player is. He was a great GPP play this past week. Keenan Allen, I think, is great in cash and GPPs. I think he has a real ceiling game in his, we've seen Keenan Allen have games where he goes 10 for 150 in a touchdown or 12 for whatever. This is a game environment that can happen. We love the matchup with Tavon Young and Marlon Humphrey. He is set up, and actually he's had way more red zone targets than Williams. It's just he hasn't gotten the end zone as much. So do you feel like that's why we're shouting from the rooftops about Keenan Allen?
Yes. We're just screaming our love for this guy. No, Keenan's awesome. The matchup's great with like you said, their slot corner. And then as well, from an analytics perspective and from a numbers perspective, you just said he's getting a ton of red zone targets. He just hasn't found the end zone, and we know that eventually that's not a super sticky stat. Eventually it's going to swing back to Keenan Allen, and I would rather be ahead of that than behind it and just wait for it to happen. So, yeah, if you like Herbert in the spot, certainly you have to like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams for that matter as well.
At tight end, I can't say enough good things about Mark Andrews and his spot this week and his price this week and what he did this past week. I will say that Jared Cook will probably come in a third, maybe a fourth of the roster percentage. It's just going to be way lower. And at 3.4, he's a really good play too. I will only be playing Jared Cook in stacks with Justin Herbert because the correlation, what's going on there. So think about those two players when you're constructing your lineup. If you have a Herbert, Keenan Allen, Jared Cook stack, you do not probably want Andrews on the other side because of how popular Andrews is going to be. You're saying, I want Hollywood Brown, and he's going to be one to get there. Or on the other side, if you want Jackson, let's just say you did Jackson and Andrews, because with Jackson, I usually do skinny stacks where it's just like Jackson and someone else. Last week was bananas against the Colts, but pick one of those guys, and then, I don't know, Mike Williams or Austin Eckler on the other side.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And Eckler is going to be a guy that no one's going to play. He's priced up a little bit, 7.9K on DraftKings. We just talked about it. Those guys in the 6K range are going to dominate the roster percentage this week for good reason. But, we know Austin Eckler is just involved in the passing game as well as in the running game. And so if the touchdowns go to Eckler, you can totally stack him with Herbert if you want to as a double stack partner, or just kind of play him as a one-off, a skinny stack with, like you said, Marquise Brown. There's a lot of ways to play this game, which I think is more intriguing for tournaments than the Kansas City and Washington game, because it seems so clear and obvious what to do that there's no leverage in that, and I think this is a spot to attack.
Eckler's interesting because we have McCaffrey at 8.8. Eckler is the RB2 on this slate. Like, he's 7.9. Cook is 7.7. So he's in that range where if you want an elite running back, he's the guy, but that price feels pretty expensive for him. At least, like, we've used to getting him at a value where you and I were playing him in cash for a couple of weeks because we knew what we were going to get. So I'm not exactly sure how to get different in this game. Is it a cheap Ravens wide receiver, Devin Duvernay, or in a tournament? I don't know. Like, those are such thin plays. And Latavius Murray on FanDuel and cash, you could do it because the Chargers are a run funnel. But I think overall, like, we know where the targets are going on the Ravens side. It's Marquise Hollywood Brown, it's Mark Andrews, and then on the other side, we love Keenan Allen. So give me your Vegas pick.
I will take the Chargers, and I also love the over in this one.
I mean, come on. I'm taking the Chargers in the over. That's
always.
That's definitely how you lose money, taking the Chargers, except for this year. All right.
Yep.
Couple more games. This one, I think, is flying a little bit under the radar. It's the Dallas Cowboys at the New England Patriots. I feel like at this point, we're kind of sick of the Patriots. It's like, okay, what's really there for fantasy? What's really there for DFS? But this game is a 51-point total. The Cowboys are rolling. They're 4-1, 3.5-point favorites. But New England is so cheap. Like, they are so cheap at so many different places that they have two receivers that I think you can play. I'm totally fine in GPPs. I like Hunter Henry. Mac Jones is only 5.2. So the Patriots are so cheap as stacking options that I get why they would actually be a good combination. And then on the Dallas side, we've been talking about them all year, but they're running the ball way more than we would want. We're not getting the volume from Dak that we got last year. We were talking about all offseason, like, oh, dude, have you seen Dak's 16-game pace? We're not getting that same volume. So with this game total, do you want to stack it? And if you did, how would you do it?
Yeah, it is intriguing because it does have a nice total and no one's going to play it. And it still feels like some of the guys in this game are underpriced. You talked about Zeke. He's underpriced relative to what he's done. Like, over the last month of the season, he's averaging over 20 touches per game, over 100 yards per game, and he scored 6 touchdowns. He has been amazing. And then at the same time, we love Amari and CeeDee Lamb, and they're still kind of hanging out in the 6K range. So a lot of these guys are underpriced, but at the same time, when you look at it, it just doesn't get you excited about the game environment and the pace. But if Dallas can get there, I think that they can push New England to have to move the football. And if you told me Zeke was going to get 20 plus touches at, what would you say he comes in at, like 5 to 10% roster percentage, somewhere in there in a tournament, like, yes, I will definitely play that. So to me, this is a tournament only game. It is flying under the radar, but the total is pretty intriguing. So it is one that I think is kind of a sneaky spot to attack, and one in the late window, like we talked about. If you do need to late swap, consider some of these guys, especially on Dallas.
That is the key point. Like, it's in the late one. I think people will either not swap onto it, or it's just going to go under rostered. So looking at the roster percentages on the New England side, it's like Jacoby Myers probably will end up being the third and fourth most popular wide receiver because of his price, because of his safety. But if Nelson Aguilar is only like 3 or 4% and Myers is like 20, 22%, like, that's a great spot to say, you know what? I'm going to play Zeke and Aguilar. And that's going to be my little correlation from this game that gets super low rostered. If you wanted to do Mac Jones and Hunter Henry and bring it back with Zeke and just say, okay, those are the pieces I want from this game, I like that. Like, I think you're cheap enough that you can pay up for Devontae Adams if CMC's on this slate and you don't have somebody like Kelsey. Like, those roster percentages, when you start adding them up from the New England side, I think just get you different. But yeah, are you interested in those Dallas wide receivers? I feel like we played them a lot. We played Cooper in cash. We played Lamb in cash. They're kind of in that blah range right now where I'm like, I'll probably go elsewhere.
Yeah, it's sort of tough because the idea around Dallas' wide receivers entering the season was like, as you said, they're going to throw just so much. And we saw it in week 1 against the Bucs, as everyone does. And then since then, this has been Zeke's team, and Dak has gotten there on touchdown passes, but in reality, he's not throwing a lot. And so you really are relying on massive efficiency, which we know can regress over time. So again, their price tag is awesome. They're awesome players, but at the same time, I don't feel comfortable enough playing them in cash. So again, they're GPP only plays. By all means, take a shot on these guys. We know their talent, we know their upside, and we know how good Dak has been recently. So totally fine in tournaments.
Yeah, you haven't seen the volume from Dak, but the efficiency's still been there. And Patriots last week, remember, they made Davis Mills look awesome. They gave up 303. So Dak at 7.1 is a intriguing GPP play. Remember the last couple of weeks, he's been super popular. Where was it, people like, do I play Dak or do I play Herbert? Like those were the two conversations for a while. I see him 5%. And then when you add in CD Lamb or, I feel like people still want to play Dalton Schultz, but those are the kind of players that I think looks different. But on the New England side, Brandon Bolden might have a PPR game, but that's so thin to even think about going there. But give me your Vegas pick.
Yes. I also want to throw out real quick. Did we mention Hunter Henry at all in this game?
I mentioned him as somebody that you can stack. I wrote him up in the FanDuel GPP because of his price, and on DraftKings too, 3.9. But anything you want to say there?
Yeah, I was just going to say he's definitely separating from Jonnu Smith in terms of his usage over the last couple of weeks. He's running way more routes, seeing more targets. So I just want to throw him out there as a cheaper tight end option that isn't going to be played by anyone. And if you wanted to stack this game, he'd be intriguing at least to correlate with Mac Jones or as a bring back. So throwing him out there. But in terms of the Vegas pick, I got to go with Dallas. I'll lay the points, minus 3.5.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Dallas as well. In note on Henry, and there's like 7 tight ends I like this week. It's weird to think like I like Andrews, I like Kelsey, I like Henry, I like Cook, I like RSJ. Like all of those guys are viable.
Which means they're all going to be terrible. Perfect.
If I could run 3 tight end set, I totally would.
Oh yeah, there you go.
We were going to talk about Arizona and Cleveland as our last game that we're going to talk about stacking, but you and I have pivoted because for a number of reasons. So real quickly, give me your vibes on that game because it's not so good.
Yeah, I mean, right now it still has a decent total, but I could see that coming down pretty quickly, especially with the Cardinals dealing with a couple of positive COVID tests, I believe, just came out today on Thursday. And then, we don't know which players are involved and if it's going to lead to a bigger breakout or what. And then you throw in their center, Rodney Hudson, is out. That is a big time deal. Kyler Murray apparently is dealing with a minor shoulder issue. I think he still plays, but we saw him last year be way less than effective with the shoulder issue. So there's a lot I'm not sure. And we know that Cleveland would prefer, if they can, to control the clock, run the ball with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And so it feels like this is a game where if Kyler isn't pushing Cleveland to keep up, that Cleveland will try to slow it down. So it doesn't seem like a spot that I want to attack in GPPs this week.
I would take the under right now because you know what Cleveland wants to do, slow the game down. Yeah, it's not looking good vibes. And I feel like the Cardinals have been fortunate. They've been good, but they've been fortunate. I feel like this is one of those weeks where you can kind of say like, all right, I think it was Cleveland -3 for a while. I would take that right now and put it on Cleveland. So we're going to pivot and talk instead about the Tigers and the Lions. The Tigers, Lions, Bears, oh my. We're going to talk about Cincinnati Bengals, Detroit Lions. I was thinking about this game, Betz. If we would have talked about this game from like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we'd be like, those are the 2 worst teams ever. Like these might be the 2 worst teams in our lifetime. Just really bad, but they're kind of fun for fantasy right now. And we've talked about the Lions 3 or 4 weeks straight. So this game is a 48 total. Bengals are 3.5 point road favorites. This game's in a dome. My biggest question is about Cincinnati. Beginning of the year, we thought that they were just going to throw the ball. Joe Burrow averaged over 40 attempts a game as a rookie. They've been slow. They rank 30th in plays per game, and Cincinnati games have hit the under 4 straight games. So that's my biggest concern is if the Bengals get control of this game, they run it with Joe Mixon, and then I'm asking myself, is the stacking options going to get there?
Yeah, it's tough, especially because, like you said, our view of the Bengals entering the year was like pass, go up tempo, and be super fun, but they've just been slow and kind of had let Joe Burrow come along slowly. But there at least are signs of more passing coming, I think, for this Bengals offense. And we talked about it last week. Andy and I did, Joe Burrow now coming off of season highs in dropbacks and pass attempts. And really the thesis of this play is we know Joe Mixon is going to be popular. what if all the production in this game goes to Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, those guys who seem like they're going to be really low rostered in tournaments? So that's really my appeal here. I think Joe Mixon is a great play, but if it goes through Joe Burrow, this is a spot to attack. I mean, the Lions struggle on defense. Their corners are banged up. They're playing backups out there. And Jamar Chase, what he's done so far to start the year is unreal. Meanwhile, the Lions just giving up so much production on deep targets, and that's where Jamar Chase has made his money. So it is a spot for GPPs on the passing attack for the Bengals, but outside of that, I think it's pretty clear Joe Mixon is a strong cash play.
You know, Betz, after you mentioned, I talked to Andy last week. I didn't hear anything you said because what I really heard you saying was, hey, so I was talking to my new best buddy about DFS and I won a ton of money this past week. Go back on vacation.
That did happen. That did happen. All those things are facts.
Okay, I'm with you. I think Burrow Chase is a way to get different. On the Detroit side, it's like other than Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Khalif Raymond, I can't go there. Hawkinson's playing at less than 100%. Swift would be obviously the easy bring back. It's just Burrow, Chase, Swift, and you're done. And that's what's just hard about this game is because I think Swift will be popular. You need an otherworldly score for him, and you need this game to kind of hit the over where, let's just say Burrow goes for 302 and another on the ground or something. Chase gets a touchdown, and then Swift, you're going to need 6-7 catches, which he can do, and a little bit more. So I just know this game. I've seen the Bengals play, and I've seen them say, I want to play slow. Like even last week against the Packers, that game hit the under, and they went to overtime. Like it was just a slow game that didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. But I do love Mixon. This is more of a cash question, but do you feel like you're trying to decide between Mixon and Swift because they're in the same game? Last week that didn't work because I said, James Robinson, I'm going to play Derrick Henry, and it was totally fine.
Yeah, I do feel like that a little bit. My lean right now is that I prefer Mixon to Swift, but like I said at the top of the show, if we get news that Hawkinson is out, Swift would just be almost a lock for me, given the target share that he would see.
All right, so give me your Vegas pick on this one.
I'm going to take the Lions. I'm going to take them plus 3.5 with Dan Campbell crying after the press conference after the heartbreaking loss to Minnesota. I'm going to ride the narrative. They play tough for their guy and cover the spread.
I am also going to take the Lions because today, as of our recording, is Jared Goff's birthday. He turns 27.
Jared. Happy birthday. What a guy.
Yeah, home. I feel like Jared Goff at home. They're kind of due for some good luck. So yes, there's some narrative there, but I'll take the Lions plus 3.5. I think they can get a win. All right, DFS Battle Royale.
DFS Battle Royale.
Betz and I are tied 10-10, and we're going to blaze through these picks. We've got some fun ones, but give me a stacking quarterback under 6K on DraftKings.
This is the worst. There's no one other than your guy that actually want to play, but you got in the show doc first. So I'm going to go with Mac Daddy Jones here, McCorkle coming up here at 5.2K. We just talked about the Dallas game. We think that they're going to be forced to pass a little bit more, and he's dirt cheap. So I will go with Mac against your guy, who I really would prefer.
Yes, I'm going to pick the Heine, as Billy Madison would say. But yes, Taylor Heineke set up to destroy, which is crazy to say. Like we're talking about Taylor Heineke, something I did not know. When I was writing up some stuff, Taylor Heineke and RSJ. Did you think that your 2021 season was going to have them?
No. Or Kadarius Toney, who literally did nothing the entire summer, and all of a sudden he's like a Hall of Famer at this point. So who knows?
That's a fun process if you want to do that. Just like write down some names and go, okay, they weren't on a draft board. Nobody was talking about them. They were in 0 rankings, and yet RSJ is a good play. We're talking about him this week. All right, give me a cash game running back that's not CMC or Eckler.
Yep, we just talked about this guy. It's Joe Mixon taking on the Lions. They're just getting destroyed by running backs. 6.4K. He looks like a really strong cash game play this week.
Darrell Henderson is locked in my cash game lineup at 6K against the Giants, 10.5 point favorites. Give me 15 plus points. Feels too safe. All right, give me a cheap wide receiver.
All right. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4.2K taking on the Bengals. We just talked about it. someone has to catch the football, and he's competing with Kadero Hodge and a bunch of other randos for targets at wide receiver. So I will take the talented rookie going up against Mike Hilton in the slot.
In the show doc, I have a picture of a camel, so I will take Adam Humps as the dude this week because I just want to. At this far, it's not a running joke. It is a serious conviction that Betz is wrong about Adam Humphries because apparently I like guys that aren't very good at football and should be out of the league. So Adam Humphries.
I just hope DeAndre Carter has a career game. That's what I hope this week for you.
Dang it. It could happen. It could happen. I feel like Humphries has one of those games though once a year, and I could sniff it out.
He does.
It's this week. All right, give me a mid-price tight end between 3 and 4K. It's not great punt options, but I guess yours is kind of a punt.
Yep, we talked about this guy, and I've got a picture of a seal in the show doc, so I will take Ricky Seals-Jones at 3K. We just talked about that game environment. Someone has to catch the football besides Terry McLaurin, and it's not going to be Adam Humphrey, so it's got to be Ricky Seals-Jones.
I will take Hunter Henry at 3.9K because the Patriots are dumb and decided to pay more money than any person known to man should receive being a blocking tight end for Jonnu Smith. So he's the dude. And last but not least, sneaky DST.
Yeah, we got the same game here. I'm going to take the Cardinals, 2.7K on DraftKings. Cleveland ranks 25th in adjusted sack rate allowed. Arizona, 3rd in the league in takeaways. So hopefully we see Baker get forced in some dropbacks, get some sacks, get some turnovers. So give me the Cardinals.
I will take the Browns. Kyler Murray's banged up. The Browns create a ton of pressure, ranking 1st in pressure rate, and their opponents are only averaging 223 passing yards per game. I like the under, and I just want Myles Garrett to win Defensive Player of the Year for my DraftKings bet. So let's get into the mailbag. We have some great questions.
Mailbag.
So we're going to blitz through a couple of these, and some are from our Discord channel. I gave a shout out to some of those people in that channel. I wanted to make sure that they were heard and that they know they're valuable, so I gave some of them precedence, and then we got some from Twitter. But this first one is off of Discord from Saquon Sparkly, which is a great name. Is there a general strategy shift you guys recommend for building cash or GPP lineups when the main slate shrinks due to bye weeks? And we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday, but I think it's worth us saying yet again.
Yeah, basically when the slate size comes down, the player pool also shrinks, obviously, and so usually on the main slate, if you have 13 games, it's way easier to kind of pick the best plays that stand out for cash games. And there's already a bunch of decision points on this slate, like we talked about, like which of the 6K running backs do you want to play? There's not a lot of great value at wide receiver. Like it gets way more difficult to kind of construct your lineup. And so as a result, we tend to see the caching score come down a little bit. And it is a slate that tends to kind of shape out that there's less comfortable plays that you have to go to in cash. Still, we can make better decisions than our opponents, but at the same time, it is way less comfortable. And then as well, I'll just say because of that in GPPs, the games that people will target and attack are so obvious and clear. Like we talked about, it's going to be KC and Washington this week. So it's a bit easier, I think, to see where to get different, whereas it's a little bit tough to do on a large slate.
I think GPPs is my biggest difference where it's shaping up to be a week where there's a lot of wide receivers that are going to be low rostered in that, 7K range. Like people aren't going to be paying up for a ton of wide receivers because they're trying to get these running backs, quarterbacks, and double tight ends. I will not be playing double tight ends in GPPs. It's just not a great strategy to win the flex with the tight end. So that's just the biggest caveat. I know we're going to get sent a lot of screenshots of lineups of people saying, I went double tight end. I went Kelsey Andrews or I went RSJ Andrews, one of those two. That's totally fine. In GPPs, though, you need a GPP winning score, and a tight end's usually not going to be one to give you that. I mean, Andrews was that player this past week. So I would just say get a little different there, get a little different in your stacking options, and find some of those wide receivers. Like instead of getting all the 6K running backs, take one of them and then pay up for Zeke and correlate with, Hunter Henry. And I think you can get different that way. So next one from Justin Smith. How often do you completely punt a position or roster spot versus trying to strike a semblance of balance? So how often do you punt?
Yeah, it sort of depends on the slate. And typically there's slates that kind of set up as more of your traditional like stars and scrubs type of build where we have a lot of options at the 3K range that you feel comfortable about. And then there's slates like this where we don't have a lot of that. And so this is a week where I'll probably try to build more of a balanced lineup. And it really just depends on what opens up value-wise based off, either injuries or how many games are on the slate, that sort of thing. But this looks like a week to me. Maybe you feel differently, Kyle, but this looks like a week to me to build more of a balanced lineup.
Yes, it's definitely one where I would say punting at least one spot, wide receiver or tight end makes sense. You don't punt running back. You just don't do it. Now, if there's a crazy value, then you can go in that direction. And Darrell Williams 4.9 is good, but he's not way down there. So yes, you want to punt usually one position. You need to get up to a stud. I think when you start balancing it out too much, you can look at your roster and you have a bunch of players. You're like, oh, these are good players. Like I feel good about all these people, but maybe you're only getting median scores. Like last week, if you didn't have Devontae Adams in your lineup or Derrick Henry, you didn't pay up for a stud, then you were screwed. So would you rather have Devontae Adams and I don't know who was a punt play this past week? RSJ, like he was the punt tight end. I'd rather have those two than paying up for a middle price tight end and getting a different wide receiver. So we usually say punt one position, tight end. Like if Kelsey's off the slate, then it's even better. You're like, okay, well, I can miss out on the high score, but usually there's a wide receiver in the 3 to 3.5K range that you and I are like, okay, I can get that. And this week it's Adam Humphries. All right, next one off the website from Bartsy82. I got this one out one of our articles and I wanted to make sure, but can you guys explain which tournaments to play and which ones to stay away from? I feel like I'm always entering the wrong tournaments. That's a common question, so don't feel bad, Bartsy.
Yes, and also this is the first time we ever had a question from the site come in for our show, but I like the smaller fields, so that's what I've talked about, and I'm more of a single entry type of player. So the ones that I like over on FanDuel, I'll just mention real quick. They do it's called a 1K Sunday NFL Small Bomb. It's 47 people. And so, it's a tournament that it's one entry. It's not that expensive. And it's pretty good in terms of the top heavy payout. Like first place gets $300. It's $25 to enter. So it's not anything crazy. And, you're going to lose a couple of those here and there. But if you win a couple, you just have way more confidence in your ability to play these small fields, which is what I like to do. So that's one that I'll throw out. And then, just to get your bankroll built up, we love the large field 50-50s, the ones that are like 5,000 people, single entry, $5, $10, $25. Those are easier, we think, to cash in more consistently. So I'll throw out those two types of tournaments and cash games for us.
And on DraftKings, they have so many 50-50s like that, where the field is huge. The one that I write up every single week and I kind of use as a gauge for a lot of people for my cash lineup it's called the Massive Double Up, $5 entry. There's 23,000 people that can get in. It's single entry. So it's just like such a great gauge to be able to tell yourself. Now on FanDuel, your 50-50s are smaller, like they're 100-person fields. So that's why Betz and I personally play cash on DraftKings. You can play on both, but DraftKings I think has better spots to build up your bankroll. And with head-to-heads, I love that you brought this up over the offseason. I don't know if you remember when you talked about some simple ways to create an edge. When you're doing head-to-heads, and you should be doing head-to-heads to kind of reduce the variance, with head-to-heads, don't just randomly join somebody else's, because what's going to happen is you're going to get picked off by people that set up in the lobby, okay? Instead, you can create your own. And so that's what I do every single week, is I'd rather create my own head-to-heads. Let's just say I do $20 entries. That's just a safe number. Then I'm letting people come to me, and you can also set your limits where it's only one entry per person. I'm not having Betz, bully me with 20 different entries. Instead, it's just 1v1. And Betz and I don't really play each other in cash because we go back and forth about our lineups. So it would be kind of stupid to do that. But you don't want to go against those sharks in the water. Would you say that that's something that beginners at least get picked off?
Definitely. That's 100% what happens. So yeah, make your own head-to-head, set your opponent limit to 1 so that it's not the same person playing you over and over and over again to reduce the variance. And then as well, you can block people on DraftKings that, let's say you played the same person 3 or 4 times in a row, they keep taking your head-to-head, just block them if they keep beating you. You want to play against opponents of a similar skill level or experience level rather. So yes, definitely do that. And I'll reference that article on the website. I talked a lot more in detail about how to do that, step-by-step process and all that. So check that out online, thefantasyfootballers.com.
And for GPPs, I'll give you one tournament on DraftKings that I think is softer than others. It's a large field. So this is a large field, different than what Betz was saying, but it's the play action. It's $3 entry. And then the thing I like about the play action is it's only 20 max entries. I think for a lot of people, they hear about 150 max and like, I cannot put in 150 lineups. I have no idea how to even do that. Just learning how to do the optimizer. So 20 lineups, I think, is doable for people to figure out how they want to build it. And then that's only $60 entry. So I think that's a better spot. But I just want to preach this. If you are going to enter in one of those large fields, you need to be prepared to max enter. Like if it was up to me, I would max enter the Millie Maker, even though it's just a not great EV tournament. I throw out a golden gun, a one shot, because it's kind of a fun thing. And I've actually done pretty well on my one shot this year. I've cashed every single week on my one shot. But you need to be able to max enter or else just move along. Like just move along. If you're not going to max enter, if you're only going to put in $1 entry in 150 max, just realize the field has way better chances than you already if they're putting in 150. So that's why Betz is like, hey, I don't really want to deal with that. So I'm going to go to the small field and it's going to be better. All right, a couple more questions here. How many players should be in your core? This one's from 100K_gamer on Twitter. How many players should be in your core if you're going to multi-enter a contest? Is there a loose rule you follow, or is it really just week dependent based on where the salaries fall? So I think he's saying more for GPPs. How do you figure out who your core is?
Yeah, I think, and I don't use optimizers a lot to build my lineups, but I tend to kind of have like 4 to 6 places that I like to go. And usually what I'm looking at is stacking. And we just know the correlation means a lot, especially in the smaller fields that I play in, where like I'll usually pick a bunch of quarterbacks that I like and then kind of run the optimizer that way. So as a result, it sort of limits my core to pass catchers and running backs on those teams that I like. So that's kind of how I build my core. But I guess, I mean, you're more of a large field tournament player than me, Kyle. So maybe you can answer this question better. But for me, I would say somewhere in like the 4 to 6 team type range. And then, you know, a couple wide receivers from each team kind of builds out my core.
Yeah, you can think about it in terms of teams and stacking, or you can say, here's my core of running backs. So we mentioned a lot of those 6K guys. I have no idea what the right combination is. Is it Taylor Swift? Is it Taylor Swift? Is she the right combination? Jonathan Taylor, is it DeAndre Swift? Is it Jonathan Taylor and Joe Mixon? Is it Darrell Henderson and Zeke? Like, there's probably 4 or 5 guys that I really like. Gibson you can throw in there. So I think of my core as saying, here's 6 running backs I really like, and maybe throw in another that's cheap. Like I like Chase Edmonds, maybe you like Darrell Williams, maybe you'll throw in Eckler, like, and just say, here are 5 or 6 running backs I'm going to roll with. And in an optimizer, you're basically putting those people and your exposures on there and saying, all right, I want half of my lineups to have this, or a third of my lineups to have this. And then you go from there. But Betz pointed out the key point. It's not just saying, here's my running backs I like. It's saying, if I have Darrell Henderson in my lineup, I probably need to bring it back with, you know, Tony or Shepard. Like those are the 2 dudes I want. Or if I want Swift in my lineup, then I need Chase. So those are the ways, if you're hand building your lineups, just think, I'm going to build 20 entries and I need to make sure I'm correlating across different positions. So for me, running backs come up with, 5 to 7. Wide receivers, I'm sorry, but your core is going to end up being like 10 players. Like it's just so many wide receivers. And then for quarterbacks, you and I kind of limit it. We're like, here's the 3 quarterbacks I like. I'm just going to roll with these stacks and see what happens. All right. 2 more things. All right. This question I really liked, came off of Discord from Cloaked Mistborn. Says this: what additional info or analysis besides injury updates like, Alexander Madison this past week makes you move on or off a guy come Saturday or Sunday? As a new player, I'm not sure what the difference is between anxiety fuel switches and logical readjustments.
Yeah, this is a good question because there is a lot of noise on Sunday. And then I would say more of the actionable information doesn't really come Sunday morning. Like, of course, we get the Shefty bomb at midnight, and that matters for who's in and out, as it did last week. But there's not a lot that I'm looking at Sunday mornings that really changes my process from the week before outside of major news, which is injuries, essentially. So, yeah, like little Twitter clips that people post of a guy warming up, or a report from Rap Sheet that so-and-so might lead the backfield this week that kind of is more wrong than right usually. That kind of stuff is noise to me. I'm not following that. For me, it really is just trusting the process throughout the week. going back in Sunday morning to kind of re-reference the roster percentage report, re-reference our DFS rankings. That sort of stuff matters. Not as much to me the little kind of, I guess, catchy blurbs that you see out there on social media.
I think the news that solidifies a player is if somebody's out, does their role feel more secure? So the week we switched on to Saquon, it was because Devontae Booker was ruled out, right? Like that was the key piece of information. Like, oh, they feel confident enough with Saquon that he's going to be the dude this week. We weren't really worried. So those are the kind of things that you move on to a player. I think moving off to a player is any negative news is negative. Like, you know, we usually hear only positive things from coaches. So I always take negative news in the off season to mean like a big deal. So when we hear limited snaps or they're on a pitch count, like I could play the game if I want, but one week I moved off Darrell Henderson because it was like, all right, I don't know for sure that he's going to be the guy. And so I'd rather know for certainty and just deal and be a little risk adverse. And maybe that's just more my style, but I changing your opinion is a good thing. You want to be able to do that over time and be open to it. But the convictions you had on Thursday or Friday, hopefully they were part of a good process and not just, I like this player. It's, I like this player and here's kind of how he fits into a lineup. All right. Last question is kind of an open-ended one from Connor Scott. If you and Betz could change something about DFS to make it better, what would it be? That's such a broad question. At first I wanted to say kickers. Bring back the kickers.
That's what Showdown is for, man. Let's see. This is an interesting question. I guess I'll go with, I would prefer less rake from these sites that take our money. So of course they have to. They're running a business, right? DraftKings, FanDuel, they're running a business, Yahoo. So every entry fee that you pay and your opponents pay, they take a little bit of it, and that makes the pot smaller to play in. So I would say that would be one thing I would change if possible, but at the same time, I understand why it has to happen.
I would like for it to be legal everywhere because not only is it good for our show, but it's just good for people to be able to play a game. Like the money part is super fun. And I think some people have a hard time like, hey, isn't that the main deal? It is a game. Like I like playing this game with people. I don't play video games at all. This is a game that I enjoy interacting and figuring out the strategy, and I want to win and I want to have a process. So I would like for it to be legal everywhere. But game-wise, it's getting harder, I would say, than it was 3 or 4 years ago in terms of pricing. And I like that. Like it's a new challenge for you and I to be able to look at a slate and go, okay, I can't just say, here's the 3K running back. You know, like that was just way too easy in a free square. And quarterback pricing on FanDuel is really hard. There's a lot of challenges and nuances that I think are there. But yeah, if we want to bring back the kickers, I like the random element. I think it's super fun. If you want to play with us, you can go to ballersdfs.com and I will get to add a couple of contests this week. Betz, in here, what do you notice about this lineup that I posted in here this week?
There are so many flames on this lineup. This person put up 243 points in your, it was called Kyle's Still at the Beach tournament in our league. It's interesting. There's not a lot of correlation, but it's still an awesome lineup where there's just so many good plays that the chalk all hit and this person won our tournament. So congrats to you.
This was Andy's lineup that somebody copied and used for Kyle's at the Beach tournament. I'm just going to tell this to Andy. I'm going to tell you listeners, you guys can keep copying his lineup that they do on the Friday show. But at the end of the day, there needs to be some more correlation in this lineup. That was the biggest thing that I told Andy. I was like, Andy, did you not listen to any of the shows, dude? Dude, we talk about correlation the whole time. And what are you doing playing Jonnu Smith? Were you not looking at the routes run? He could have easily played Hunter Henry and won the whole thing.
Yep.
We're expecting more from Andy, right? Or is this just, hey, he's killing it. We've got nothing. I can't argue with his results, right?
You really can't. So it's pretty impressive at this point. I feel like I just want to hop on with everyone else and just play one lineup and just copy him and see what happens. But yes, as you said, the variance will probably hit sooner than later, which is not great for the bankroll.
So we are glad that you guys are with us. This week is going to be a super, super fun one. Feel free to send us those screenshots of all those cash, but looking forward to the weekend.
Yes, it should be a great slate. As we said, this is the real first test, I think, of the season. Difficult slate, but we can bring it home this week. Good luck to everyone. We'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.